Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Perfect Parry podcast. My name is Ryan Seals.
This is Jade.
And I'm Fox.
And we are here today to answer one very important question. Fox, what have you been playing lately?
So I've been kind of mixing between two games just because of timing. Because Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, I almost said Curse of the Moon, but that's the wrong game. Ritual of the Night and Judgment came out around the same time frame. And I kind of lucked out through a bad decision because I ended up buying Bloodstained on PS4 on Tuesday, forgetting that, like, oh, I'm playing Judgment on Friday because I already have that pre-ordered and I can play it early. And I kind of wanted Bloodstained on the Switch, but I literally already hit, like, purchase. I was like, well, shit. And I was like, oh, that sucks, because I kind of wanted to be able to play Bloodstained just, like, you know, while I'm chilling, laying in bed and just going through it there, because Judgment's going to take up all my time on the PS4. And then I find out that the Switch port on the Bloodstained is total garbo. So I kind of lucked out on that part. Other than that, these games are really good. Bloodstained is the Kickstarter game by Igarashi, the not creator, but a very important figure in Castlevania history.
Kind of the creator for Castlevania as we currently know it.
Modern Castlevania, because everyone who actually knows the lore knows that Castlevania starts at Symphony of the Night. So,
very famously termed Igavania.
Yes, thank you. And it's kind of weird coming back to this because Metroidvanias have kind of been going nuts on indie games. There's been a lot. I came very close to actually just making a video about that because I was like, man, we've had a lot of really good ones in the last little while, and it feels going back. It feels weird going back to something like this that is very clearly Metroid, or not very clearly Castlevania, because there's certain things that I forgot were a part of that, namely single attack animations. So you're very locked into your attack animations when you take a swing of your sword, and then when you hit it again, it's just that same animation over and over and over again. There's no combos. So I was in this mindset of playing like Hollow Knight and Guacamelee, where it's like, oh yeah, you hit 3 times and you get little combo out of each attack. It's like, no, that is not what you're doing in this game.
Well, like, I've also played Bloodstained a bit. I've gotten up through to the bad ending, what I assume is the bad ending. I still haven't gotten through everything yet. But, like, I noticed that too. On first glance, it definitely seems like Castlevania's got a relatively basic combat system. And it's not necessarily a bad one, but it's one we don't really see much these days. You know, it's got that starkness. It's got that simplicity to it. I will say, though, I did find that there is a bit more of a skill, like, ceiling there and a way to, like, increase your DPS beyond just that, because so I never played the, like, old Castlevanias. I've played, like, about 2 or 3 hours of Symphony of the Night. I haven't completed it. I want to. I know they're great games that I'll enjoy. It's just, you know, time. That's how the shit works. But having played Bloodstained, one thing I noticed in my time with it is you can cancel attack ending lag from aerials if you land as the attack comes out, which when I was playing it, I was using the whip a lot because, you know, of course I'm going to. It's fucking Castlevania. And I found that I could just, like, throw piles of damage out just by jump canceling and, like, aerial attacks.
I like how in a game that isn't Devil May Cry, you're turning it into Devil May Cry.
I have a fucking problem.
But yes, I totally get what you're saying. There is, like, those little nuances to the combat that you can kind of figure out, but aren't essential to playing it.
Yeah, they aren't core to it. But my kind of point is that if you want that kind of stuff, like, don't get me wrong, it's not the richest thing in the world. It's definitely not Devil May Cry. But, like, you know, it's there, and there are ways to, like, kind of make it a bit more dynamic, a bit more demanding, a bit more complicated, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. Because there is the thing that I like from it, and this is coming from... Because I'm not any more of a Castlevania expert, but I have played a bit more. And a lot of the mechanics also come from the Aria of Sorrow series and some of those later games, where every enemy has a soul, essentially, that you can pick up if you're lucky enough, because there's like a percentage to them. And then you can use their abilities. And I think in Bloodstained, there's 4 different types in terms of like archetypes. And so there's some that are like passive, where they just give you an increase. Some that are your long range attacks. Some that are your close range attacks. And then there's some that are basically like transformations. Like you can turn into a bunny girl if you get the bunny girl's soul.
Right, there's 5, because there's also familiars.
Yeah, and there's familiars. So the first one I got was like a fairy. And I was like, oh, cool. So I got this fairy tagging along. And the other mechanic I really like, and I think this was in some of the other games, but I could very well be wrong, is if you get a soul from a demon and you get their mechanic, and then you go back and you get it a second time, that ends up piling up, and then it levels up that soul, that shard. And not only does it make it more powerful, it actually will upgrade it. So sometimes that means like an extra projectile. Sometimes that means like extra mechanics, like the bunny girl transformation that you can get if you get the soul a few more times. You get more of their moveset, which is like, oh, that's actually like a really cool thing. So I just end up like in a hallway, just constantly going in and out through doors, just being like, I'm gonna just like grind to upgrade this one shard I really like.
Yeah, no, I found that too, and it's a really cool system. But one kind of drawback I found to it was, like, kind of as a result of that, it was really easy for like certain moves to snowball and just objectively become your permanent best option. Like I got like 2 or 3 souls for like a couple abilities, but then for Bone Toss I got like 12. So it was just objectively way better than like everything else I had on offer.
Oh yeah, 100%. Another thing I also want to mention that's like, because this was a Kickstarter game and it was a famously successful Kickstarter that got a bunch of money, you can tell they put a lot of that into the voice actors. Oh, they have a lot of really good voice actors, and it is so weird fighting Zangetsu because you just hear David Hayter. It's just Snake.
It's literally just Snake.
But yeah, I think it's really good that they put a lot of time into just the production of this game, because it looks pretty good. There is certain perspectives that look kind of off because it's 3D, but it's in a 2D perspective.
Yeah.
So there's some wonkiness there, but it definitely looks better than it used to in the like early betas. So you can tell they really took their time on this one.
Yeah, like it feels sincerely polished. It feels like because like there is a bit of wonkiness here and there, but I also don't want to undersell it. I think this game looks fucking amazing. I think it's just filled with personality all the way through. The shift to 3D has kind of lost something, but it's also kind of brought a lot of like other respectable elements in, you know, and like, yeah, that's basically it. I just think the game looks really fucking good, like visually speaking, and in terms of like the tone it sets out, it feels really good, and more importantly, it feels like Castlevania from what I have like played with it. It felt exactly like that.
It feels very much like Castlevania. You can tell this was made by the creator or a creator of it.
Yeah, like if your goal in kickstarting this game was to like get another Castlevania, good news.
Yeah. And then I have some things to say about Judgment, but I will let Jade talk about her very eventful week of playing a certain game first.
Hun, I don't know what you want me to say. I got my wisdom teeth taken out. I have been bedridden and, like, eating Jell-O for days. All I can really do is, like, look at anime titties on my laptop and play Genital Jousting by myself because everybody's out living their life. So, I'm suffering. But
you're going to get to that top level of Genital Jousting pro play.
There's, like, a story mode, okay? I'm just
Is
letting
it about
you know,
love
like,
and coming together?
no, it's about fucking yourself in the butt and then, like,
So yeah, love and
learning
coming
to...
together.
Listen, I have nothing to defend myself with. You're attacking someone who is already on the ground.
That's why I win.
Is there any honor in winning someone who is already dead?
Yeah.
You're a bitch.
So, Jade, do you want to, for the uninformed, do you want to explain what this genital jousting is?
Oh god, am I
God.
even going to be able to show footage of this game in the fucking like podcast? Because
Well,
like
they're
I
like
usually edit
cartoon
video.
wieners.
It's just,
Like, yeah, they're
it just put a picture that's like heavily pixelated.
Oh wait, no, I'm pretty. I'm going to double check, but I'm pretty sure like Jim Sterling did a full video on it, and it didn't get taken down, so I should be good, right?
I think so.
No,
Like,
no
you
one's
can
going
also...
to report this, right?
These wieners also wear clothes, so... Okay, so...
Does that make it, is it the Donald Duck problem where that makes it somehow worse?
Yeah, it kind of is.
Like somehow they're
Which-
more naked now?
Which penises are and aren't sentient?
Well, all of them are. All of the penises are sentient. So, this game, it is a game that both has a story mode, but generally speaking, people mostly play it for the multiplayer. You play as a penis with a butthole, and your goal is to, like, essentially, it's like Mario Party, where there's a bunch of different mini games. Like, you can play soccer with these little wiener people, or, like, you can, like, throw darts, or, like, play a game of who can dingle each other in the butt the most. But you can grab things with either end of your schlong, and then also drop things with either end of your schlong. And then you kind of inch across the ground like a worm in a top-down shooter. And that's basically it. There's a lot of different minigames. There is, in fact, a story mode, and it's very, very weird. It has the same energy as, like, an SNL bit on like, sex ed, on, like, awkward sex ed, where it has, like, this deadpan narration for everything, and then everything, the language of it is very flowery, save for, like, really specific words like porn or rectum. But it'll use flowery language for, like, anything else. It's really funny.
That sounds exactly like something you'd make.
It is something I would make if you just gave me, like, a little bit of training on Unity and, like, also just took my wisdom teeth out.
If you took Jade's wisdom teeth out and then sent her to a game jam.
So what you're saying is you are quite literally right now in the perfect state of mind to enjoy this game.
Oh, absolutely. Like, if there was any time for me to be playing this, it was gonna be now.
Well, y'all heard the wisdom. Go get your wisdom teeth removed and then go play Genital Jousting. It's the best way to experience that game.
Also, there's this, like, bird chirping right outside my window, and it's so loud, and I can't get it to shut up.
Catch it. Just grab
Bark!
it. Reach out the window.
Bark,
grab it.
bark!
That's not working.
I can't catch a bird. What the hell, do I look like a spider monkey?
Fuck it. Everyone will think it's just, like, ambient background noise. We're shifting to ASMR.
That's fucking awful.
With bird sounds.
That's terrible. Well, that's what I've been playing for, like, the past 3 days. Basically just by myself. It's so lonely. I can only hope that you guys have been having more of a time.
I have mainly been playing 2 games. One is this little game y'all may have heard of called Minecraft. I slipped back into that. If
isn't
you're
that game for
with
gamers?
It's the prequel to Fortnite.
I mean, like, Hatsune Miku's a good dev or whatever, but, like, really, hun?
But yeah, I just kind of got sucked into that. Yeah, Minecraft still good in 2019, still fun, still enjoyable. Glad it came from space. It's really cool. And
I'm looking at this game and it looks like really old. Like
believe it or not,
pixels and
believe
like,
it or
when
not,
did this
Fox,
get made?
that's actually an intentional thing. It's kind of like a callback to like, do you remember what like old video games look like? How they used to be like just a bunch of tiny squares and shit.
Yeah, so like back in like
Yeah,
2016.
Yeah,
the worst time frame of games.
Yeah, no, that one. But you see, some fucking weirdos actually like that shit, so they like will like try and adapt that, and it always just looks fucking terrible. But like, you know, it's supposed to be artsy or some shit, as though games are like art.
I mean, they must have done something well if Telltale made a story mode for it.
That's actually a fair point. If the unsurplantable Telltale is making games about your game, that must mean it's like artistic, right?
Yeah.
This rabbit hole has gone way too fucking long.
Like, the joke lost all its momentum the second it started.
It was a terrible bit, but you gotta see these things to the end.
Let's
you gotta
see how far we can
end.
take this bit.
I'm sorry, are you a quitter? Because I'm not a quitter. Anyways, I've been playing Minecraft, you know, because it's fun, it's cool, it's a good way to kind of like unwind, and I've needed that a lot lately. But I've also, to kind of completely juxtapose that, started playing Celeste.
Oh yeah,
I was seeing you playing that on Switch, and I was like, what? Okay.
Well, I realized I had enough coins saved up that I could get it for like $5, and I've been curious about it for a while, so I was like, fuck it. And yeah, it is certainly a good video game. And as someone who is kind of like long since been burnt out on those like retro style indie platformers, I really like this. I really like it a lot. It's not that surprising if you know what it is and you know who I am and my tastes and the kind of shit I'm into. Celeste is kind of clearly up my alley, that kind of like introspective artsy bullshit. Like, I don't know if it's like, I still haven't finished it, admittedly. So I don't know if it's like going to be like top tier for me, you know, in the way that like something like Undertale is, or a Cave Story. But like, I think I'm about halfway through it, and yeah, no, it's very decidedly challenging, but it's also a lot of fun, really interesting, and I haven't been bored. It's definitely very well put together.
Man, now I kind of want to finish my shit on Minecraft on our server thing. But just thinking about all these games that we've been playing, you know, I haven't actually played Celeste in a while because I'm really bad at it. But I think one of my favorite things about it, other than the very obvious like art direction part, because holy shit, that game is pretty, and like just the animation is so fluid, and like the way that she squishes, like I love that.
Yeah, the animation and like the tone of the world is like just absolutely stellar. They did a lot to like set the like atmosphere and all of that.
But I personally really liked that it wasn't so much a game about like, it wasn't so much about a game about defeating your own self-hatred or like just not hating yourself anymore. It was accepting the part of you that hated yourself a little bit.
Well, one thing I've really liked about it so far is kind of how it reflects that like the ways your self-hatred can come back and manifest in ways that hurt others. Because like I don't want to spoil it if you haven't played it. I do recommend playing it. It is definitely worth your money. It is very good. I realize you got this recommendation like fucking 6 months ago or whatever, but like there are scenes in there that are very transparently supposed to be essentially metaphorical for her lashing out due to her own emotional failings. And that I find really interesting. That is the kind of stuff, the kind of nuance I like seeing explored, and I enjoy seeing in these kinds of stories. So like it's clear that they're not like just half-assing it. The self-loathing thing isn't just like, here's a little bow to put on it so you feel like you did good. It feels like something they actually thought out and have distinct, unique things to say about it.
So are you telling me that this is the video game Evangelion?
Don't fucking get me started.
Fuck your mouth.
Do not get me started. We will be here all fucking day.
I just had to get that in there.
Did you know that every plot point in Evangelion is a direct result of aliens?
Did you? Does that go with the 37 timelines thing?
No. This is the start of all of the timelines. Everything is fucking aliens. The whole thing. That's the grand conspiracy. It's all fucking aliens, and it doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter in the fucking least.
Well, yeah, because the only thing that matters is who best girl is.
Oh boy, our comment section is gonna be fucking shit now.
Comment
a cold wind
comment below
through my cabin.
Comment below with who the best girl of Evangelion is. We want to hear from you, the audience.
God, I hate everything that just happened.
If anyone says Ritsuko, you're getting banned from the channel. Like, I'm blocking you.
So yeah, so big recommendations for Celeste?
Big recommendation for Celeste. Like, if it seems like your kind of thing, that's the thing I should clarify, is like, it's really cool, it's fantastic, I love it, but it's also one of those things where I can tell it's not really doing a whole lot that hasn't been done before. Like, the introspective indie platformer, those are, like, even great ones are kind of dime a dozen, And, like, this does that exceptionally well. If you like that at all, if you've liked even one of those, this is worth your time. But if you don't, this probably isn't going to be what sells you.
That actually makes a good segue onto my secondary game if you don't have anything more to say about Celeste.
I'm good.
Okay. So the other game outside of Bloodstained that I've been playing is Judgment, aka Judge Eyes in Japan. And this is made by the same people who make the Yakuza games, GRR Studios. So have either of you played a Yakuza game?
I have, yes.
You have? Jade, have you played any of them, or are you familiar with that series?
What, with Yakuza?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm familiar with the Yakuza games, but I'm not not good at them.
Not like an expert.
But you have played them, or are you just kind of passingly familiar?
I've touched a few of them and
Okay.
been really bad at a few of them.
Okay. So Judgment is a very... The creator said it's not a spin-off, it's a spin-off. It's not technically in the same universe as the Yakuza games, but it's in the same setting. It's in Kamurocho in Tokyo.
It's an AU.
Yeah. It's an alternate universe. But it's so weird hearing them say it's not a spin-off because it's like the most clear spin-off. And I have to say, whoever the level designer is at this studio must have the easiest gig ever because it's just recreating Kamurocho every other 2 years. Because it's literally, if you've played any of them, especially the more recent ones, you can go through that map like by memory. It's like, oh, there's Millennium Tower, so this is like center of the map. Okay, the far end is where the batting cages are. It's straight up that. I will say this is probably the most realized version of it.
Yeah, that's like one thing I would really like to see like more games do at large. It's just like reusing the maps and all of that. Because like, I mean, yeah, it's technically kind of lazy. It's technically asset flipping, that kind of thing. But like, I think there's like potential for like re-exploring the same space over and over again and seeing how it develops. And I mean, fucking Yakuza is a perfect case in point.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Despite it seeming lazy, I think they do it really well because of the change in protagonist. Because Kiryu, aka the Dragon of Dojima in the Yakuza games, is this like hardcore Yakuza badass who just everybody knows is the like toughest dude around, and people will fight him, but everybody knows that he's basically undefeatable.
He's got a reputation.
He's got a major reputation. And actually, I appreciate that you use that word because that's going to come back around. So then you go to I can't remember how to pronounce his first name. It's everybody shorts it to Talk, but Tak Yagami is the new character, but he's not a part of the Yakuza. He is a ex-defense attorney turned private detective. And we kind of start his journey when he's already become a detective. But his past is that when he was a lawyer, he got a potential murderer off, acquitted. And after he got acquitted, he ended up killing his girlfriend. And through the story, you actually learn a little bit more about that and what was actually going on. Because when you're presented it at face value, it does sound really bad. But he basically has exiled himself because he wasn't fired. He just chose to exile himself. But he still does jobs for his old law office because now he just takes on like side cases. So that's a major mechanic in this, is that this is probably the best justification for side quests. No longer is it just like, oh, hey, here's this little girl that's kind of just like wandering around and wants you to like win her a toy out of the machine. You still have those. But then you have people actually coming to your detective office and being, hey, my sister is someone stealing her panties. So you have to go out and buy a pair of panties and then hang them up outside on your roof, and then you find out a drone has been stealing them, and then you have to track it. Then you have to track it down and find the person. This is like a 4-part storyline too, of a side quest, because
what year?
You do that side quest, and then like a couple chapters later, a second one will open up after you do that one. That's, there's a trio of these perverts, and then you find out there's a serial groper on the loose that's touching girls' butts. So you have to go kick his ass.
What you're describing to me sounds a lot like someone on the Yakuza team realized that the best part about Yakuza was probably all of the side quests and went, why don't we just make the fucking game out of that?
Oh no, there is an actual storyline. There is a
like,
is a main story, but I think
like,
this is the best.
It feels like it's much more. It feels like it's much more the focus here as you're describing it to me. Is that right?
Kind of, sort of. Because one weird thing is you'll have the main storyline. So the main storyline is you're trying to catch a serial killer in Kamurocho. And that's another interesting thing, is it feels like the stakes are a little bit lower so far. I'm still kind of a third of the way through, but it's not like, all of Kamurocho is going to be taken over by this certain Yakuza, or the Tojo clan is in danger and that's going to affect all of Japan. It's very small stakes.
It's limited to individuals.
Yes, and it feels very much lower to the ground. And Yagami, it feels like he exists more in Kamurocho because of those elements than Kiryu did. Because Kiryu always kind of felt like he was a little bit alien to Kamurocho, if that makes sense. I'm sure other people might disagree, but I just feel Yagami feels much more like an actual person that exists in this world. So yeah, you're trying to catch a serial killer, but then as you're doing this main storyline, you get kind of these little kind of pace breakers just to be like, okay, Ayaba's going to look into this informant thing. Why don't you go to Tender and do this? And then you meet up with one of the regulars there, and it's this girl that's very fancily dressed, and she's always there, and people don't know what she does. So then you end up spending like 10 minutes just doing this investigation where you try to figure out what she does for a living. So you do a tail missioning, following her around and being like, where's she going? What's she doing? And there's a lot of those cool elements. And it's basically a lot of Ace Attorney elements too.
Oh, that's cool.
So you'll have investigations where you'll be presented a picture or a setting, and you have to find points of interest. Like, this body's here, but there's no blood on the floor. Oh, okay. Where's his cell phone? So you're noticing all these little things, and then a person will ask you, oh, how did you know I was there? Like, where's your evidence that I was at this location? Then you go, oh, I have this picture of you from the security cam that's tagged for 2 a.m.
And then that one song from Ace Attorney starts playing.
Yes, suspension starts kicking up. So yeah, it's really cool. I love the side quests. Like you were saying, the side quests are the best part. I was gonna say the localization team is having a lot of fun because that serial groper, his name in the English version is Ass Ketchum.
Wow.
So yeah, they're clearly having a fucking ball. And I have to talk about one of my favorite side quests that's really funny. It's funny in the worst way possible, but just because of one thing you can do as the player. So
it's not real life funny. It's video game situation.
Yeah,
funny.
it's very not real life funny, but it's video game funny. So very quickly, this one side quest you do is you meet this girl that's a street performer. She's gotten a little bit of a following because people just love coming to listen to her sing on the street, and you kind of get to know her, and then this producer comes up and he's like, oh, hey, I'm looking for new talent, da-da-da-da. And then eventually you kind of get this like weird feeling from him, and you ended up getting his card earlier, and they kind of go off, and I'm kind of fuzzy on the specific details, but you end up having to go find them, but there's no marker on the map. So this is a nice little detail, is that you have case files. So sometimes you actually have to go into your case files to find out where specifically you need to go.
Oh,
so
I love that shit.
So the person asks you, the girl asks you, hey, I'm not sure about this guy. Can you go check up on him? So you end up following the producer to this coffee shop where he's meeting another producer person in his business. And because he knows who you are, you can't actually go in because he'll notice you. And I had a lot of trouble figuring out what he needed me to do. And then I realized, oh, this game has a disguise mechanic. So you actually have to put on a disguise at certain times to like hide in plain sight so people don't recognize you. And just before that, I did a side quest where I got a disguise of what's it called? The specific version of Dracula that's like Bram
Stoker.
Bram Stoker. You get the exact disguise of Bram Stoker's Dracula that's like full white face, blush, slick black hair, the big cape. So you end up just sitting there, and because the game is only looking for you to be disguised, not a good disguise, just disguised, you just end up sitting next to him.
It works.
And you're listening to this producer and his partner talking about like, oh yeah, we can't wait to get this girl in our thing, and then we can like basically make like porn. Like they're basically talking about a casting couch.
Yeah.
Which is like the most sleazy thing ever. But then you cut away to Yagami in full vampire costume, and he's just looking at them and he's like, God, these people make me sick. And it's so great. And then you end up chasing them down, and you have to go into your case file and find the person's card so you can find their location. Then you go to the actual location, and you just go and beat the ever-loving shit out of these people because you found them out as being like creepy fucks. And that, in the weirdest way, ends up leading to the first girlfriend that you can actually make a social link with.
Because of course it does.
Yeah, because of course it does. And it's like, it is a really well-written storyline thing. It's just like, at face value, it sounds really weird.
Yeah, no. Well, that sounds fucking amazing. That sounds like a capital V video game.
Oh yeah, it's video game, but in the best way possible.
Because what was it? It's probably just because I grew up with like Morrowind and all of that stuff. But I'm like a really big fan of that kind of quest design where it's like, here's a general set of directions. This is what you need to do. Fucking figure it out. Good luck. Bye.
Yeah. There is a lot of those where it's not going to like explicitly tell you where to go. You just kind of have to be perceptive, which fits into the whole like detective element. And I like when the game does that. I like when it actually makes you feel like you're being smart and figuring out what you need to do. There's a lot of that.
When you're the big brain genius boy.
Yeah, or you can cheat and go onto like game packs or something if you get stuck.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, no. So far, Judgment is great. I think I'm at the not 3/4 mark. First third marker somewhere on there, maybe pushing half. And so far, I'm loving it. I can't wait to see how this game kind of ends Yagami's storyline.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying it out myself. It's going to be interesting to kind of see what a Yakuza game looks like without like all of the baggage of being a Yakuza game, you know?
Yeah. This game kind of gets weighed down by that slightly because there are things where it has to be a Yakuza game, so these elements have to be a part of it. I could go on for a lot longer, but those were the main points that I did want to like highlight because those are the things that make it feel special.
Well, let me know if there's like some big tasteless like Majima cameo or something like that.
From what I know, there's absolutely no Yakuza references at all outside of like little things. Yeah, there's no characters. Shit. There's no characters. It's only I think they reference Kiryu in like a text description, and it's not even like, oh, the Dragon of Dojima. It just says like, oh, a legendary Yakuza boss did this move once.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah, really good game.
So let's get cracking on some of this Blidio Blame news.
Yeah, let's talk about some video game news now that we're done with that. That was weird. Why did I say it like that?
Yeah, imagine talking about things that we like and do.
I don't think we've ever talked about anything we liked while talking about video game news. I feel like this is just the section where we get mad.
I mean, we can briefly mention that Games Done Quick raised $3 million. That's good.
That's good. That's fucking cool. That's very cool.
But
I'm sure there's no other GDQ drama whatsoever.
Never.
There's never been any GDQ
a large gathering of gamers. Yeah, there'd never be like controversial elements to it.
Ah, fuck.
But Ryan, do you want to talk about this Phil Spencer comment on Xbox's unusual strategy?
Yeah, so Phil Spencer did a interview with Kotaku. I'm not usually one who keeps up too closely with like all of the interviews and all of that, especially in regards to like Xbox and Microsoft. Like, I think my opinion's kind of been made known how I feel about them. But that being said, I just kind of came across this interview and I found it kind of really interesting from the business side of things because it is more or less Phil Spencer essentially committing to making Xbox a much more open-ended platform and talking about how Xbox as a brand doesn't necessarily need to look like just a single console. And like, I don't know how I feel about that, but I found it too interesting to not bring up and look at, you know?
This does sound like they're kind of it goes along with that whole Xbox Game Pass thing they're doing with the PC.
Yeah, because in this interview they're talking a lot about like Phil Spencer's talking a lot about bringing traditionally Microsoft exclusive IPs, Microsoft owned IPs to potentially other consoles. Talking about crossplay, talking about essentially merging the PC environment of Xbox into the console environment for Xbox and kind of making those almost seemingly interchangeable with each other. And like that to me is just absolutely fascinating in term just as someone who came up through the generations of like Nintendo versus Sega,
Console
PlayStation,
wars.
Yeah, PlayStation versus Nintendo, Microsoft versus Nintendo. So to see any one of these guys turn around and be like, this is all a bit dumb, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And especially at this point in time where, yeah, it's kind of a bit dumb.
Mm-hmm. And like, what I found particularly telling was when Spencer was asked about like whether or not this was like a proper business move. And he mentions that the business is selling software and services now. Not...
Yeah.
And like... Honestly, yeah, services are where it's at. Like, subscription services, like frickin' like online whatever, even fucking Nintendo's doing it. You gotta buy their goddamn internet bullshit. like
Yeah, because like the one thing we have to kind of remember is like Microsoft's, or specifically Xbox's hardware division has basically been at a perpetual loss since the day it was founded. They do not make money, generally speaking, on hardware units, on like consoles and all of that. Those are very often sold at either a loss or cost neutral, and the real money comes in on like Xbox Live, subscriptions, licensing deals, all of that shit. That tends to be where most of like the Xbox money comes from. So this is kind of a stunningly pragmatic move the more I look at it.
I mean, can you remember how many friends, like, I don't know, maybe it was just my household, but, like, for, like, gifts for friends or family, like, Xbox Live was often, like, go-to gift card.
I received a ton of Xbox Live. Probably half of my online life has been paid for by other people, as far as, like, console gaming goes.
So, I do find it interesting seeing that shift, and ultimately, I do kind of agree with it. Oh, like, if only because, like, you know, I think, let me look at the interview again. He talks about his kids, you know, and talks about his...
Yeah, he talks about, like, wanting his... If I remember
his kids
right,
wanting to play
about
cross-platform in Minecraft or something.
Yeah, exactly. And generally not being able to do that. And, like... what was it? God damn it, I lost what I was going to say. Yeah, no, it's not coming back. God damn it.
It is interesting that it sounds like they're really looking at stuff like the cloud specifically. That seems to be what they're kind of trying to work with Sony.
That to me is like the only thing that kind of makes me concerned about all of this. I've made no secret about like voicing my reservations about the shift into an old digital medium. That to me is very scary and very like concerning.
I mean,
like don't get me wrong. Like the Xbox Game Pass looks fucking great. I think it needs more games right now. I checked it out, and if you're new to games, it's a pretty good deal. But like right now, it has a lot of like games you're probably likely to own already. But if they keep building that service, I think that's great. But at the same time, as I've said before, fucking keep buying physical games, because that's the only way to make sure that all of this keeps going.
I mean, how many games have we lost to the void because company just goes, oh, that's delisted. Sorry. No.
I can't play Pickle Rick anymore. That is very, very we don't get to play the classic game Pickle Rick.
I can't recommend people Platinum Games Ninja Turtles.
That's cultural vandalism.
What about Platinum Games Ninja Turtles, though? I can't recommend that to someone because you can't buy that anymore. Like, what if someone wants to play that?
Okay, at least choose the good one, because Transformers Devastation also got delisted.
Oh yeah, I guess that's
true. Can you at least call it the hot one? Because Transformers is the hot one.
Can you fuck off and never come back, please?
Are you saying you wouldn't have a go with Soundwave?
I'm saying I'm going to yeet myself down a well.
At least say Gridlock.
Fucking Soundwave's right there. And also Starscream. Don't fucking lie. You just want Starscream. But Starscream's the only one that matters in any of the incarnations.
Yeah, but like Starscream's a bottom, so like if I'm not in the mood to talk.
Okay, we're moving on.
Just delete this. Just delete this podcast.
Sorry,
right
Phil Spencer. Moving on.
But on the complete flip side,
Phil Spencer, I think you're doing great, honey. We're going to the next thing.
It is super weird that we're hearing about all this while PlayStation is coming out and kind of putting their foot in their mouth. Because a new report came from
hardcore.
Shit, that actually reminds me of what I was going to talk about. God damn it. Yeah, no, like I think it's really telling that this comes around the same time as all of the PlayStation stuff, which we will get into shortly. But I think it speaks a lot to kind of what we talked about, I think, on the last episode, about kind of how the cycle of like console generations go, of like the winner and the loser kind of constantly flip-flopping with each other. Because like right now, with what Xbox is doing, what Microsoft is doing, for me as a consumer, that's really fucking tempting. Like with PS5 and and Project Scarlet coming up, when it comes time to pick one of those consoles, it's not an automatic lock for me after this. I am going to have to make a conscious choice between the PS5 and Project Scarlet when those happen.
From what we're hearing right now, it is going to have to come down a lot to what the actual products are going to be. Because, yeah, it's really hard to say from what they're currently saying right now.
But that said, like, I will say there has been a shift in attitude and a shift in terms of, like, what it feels like the intention of Microsoft and Xbox is in this marketplace right now. And I don't know if it's necessarily something I'm eager to support, but I do think it's at least interesting and worth kind of like looking at.
Oh, totally.
So yeah, for better or worse, fucking congratulations, Phil Spencer. You've gotten me to at least consider Xbox again, which is way fucking beyond where I thought I was ever going to be.
Good job, Spencer. Good job.
You did it. I'm proud of you.
Congratulations.
Which brings us to the other side of the coin, PlayStation.
Sony positions next PlayStation for hardcore gamers TM.
What an unfortunate choice of words.
It sounds like a hard drive article.
Oh, yeah.
Well, especially with the way, it might just be the way it's being reported. But like the fact that they have like this might just be me being completely bugfuck irrational, but the fact that they spelt it hard-core pisses me off so much.
You can just see the boomer, like, boomer table, like, sitting around, like, in their conference room, like, okay, we gotta appeal to the hardcore gamers. It got like a whiteboard up.
To be fair, it probably has a lot to do with the fact that this story kind of comes back to Wall Street Journal, like the source article.
Yeah.
That famous gaming publication, the Wall Street Journal. So I'm sure they know exactly about this entire culture. But like, yeah, whatever. It's a minor nitpick and not even part of the actual story. What is the actual story, Fox?
So this is a basic summarization. So basically, a Sony rep, I don't know if they specified a name or who specifically. I don't think it was like a CEO, but they basically came out and were saying they're basically gearing the next PlayStation as a quotation marks niche product, as they always have, despite the fact that the PS4 is one of the best-selling consoles of like this current century, and apparently they're really gearing towards hardcore gamers.
I can also kind of see where he's coming from to an extent, because if you were, let's imagine for a second if you're like a Sony CEO or something like that, like a Sony higher up, and like if you run Sony, PlayStation is just one part of your shit, right? And the only people who are buying PlayStation are people with very specific interests and needs. Yeah. Contrast that with like phones and laptops and all of that shit, which at this point basically everyone needs.
Yeah.
So I can kind of see where he's coming from.
I don't know.
I think he's fucking wrong, but I also kind of get it.
I don't know if this is partially the reporting or the person speaking. Because this isn't like a video where we can actually like hear the person say it. This is just how the reporters are kind of like breaking it down. So we kind of have to go on what they're saying. Is we're getting a lot of the contradictory sounding PR language coming through in a lot of this reporting. So they talk about the PlayStation 5 is targeting players that obsess over the latest features and less mainstream titles. But then they're also talking about building good relationships with larger game companies, which means a lot less focus on like niche title, like niche indie
you know
titles.
What this you know what this dead ass reminds me of, and not just because it totally feeds into my fucking theory. That this feels almost exactly Remember when the Xbox One first got announced?
Yeah.
And they were just like, it's going to be all of these things. It's a niche product, but it's also the new way you're going to watch TV. And just, it was kind of muddled because they didn't know very specifically what they wanted it to be. And like, I don't know. It's hard to say for sure because most of the facts we've heard about the PS5 so far paint a pretty optimistic picture.
Yeah.
Like it looks good so far. It looks like they're striving to make it an actual jump in quality, which I didn't even know could really be in the cards. Like I did know, but you know what I fucking mean.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. The thing about being at top is that's when you've only got shit to lose, and Sony only stands to lose right now. And like I'm not saying it won't pan out well, but like with statements like this that feel kind of so wishy-washy and like unsure of very specifically who they're targeting.
It sounds like they're targeting the like older demographic, which I think is the smarter direction because typically people like in our age demographic have more money to spend.
Yeah, exactly. They want to reel in the people who are actually going to buy the thing.
Early adopters.
Yeah. Because here's the exact quote I found it. Sony aims to market the PlayStation 5 to actual quotation marks here, serious players. To achieve this, the company intends to focus more on the big name publishers and blockbuster titles such as Red Dead Redemption and Fallout, with less emphasis on smaller independent games. The reasoning provided was that resources are limited, and that people mainly buy consoles to play more quotation marks graphic intensive and high quality games.
Okay, so I'm going to put on the tinfoil hat for a moment, and I freely admit that everything I'm about to say not only could be complete bullshit, but in fact probably is. But like the second I hear that, my immediate anxiety begins to become, it feels like they're just trying to set up ways for like just a handful of individual really big games to be kind of the primary market, while kind of more or less ignoring things that only give like what a company the size of Sony would consider pennies, you know? And that, like, especially with like the still ongoing trend of like live service games and all of that shit, fucking, and loot boxes and all of this fucking rampant monetization. Those two factors coming together, like that statement combined with that trend, leaves me very kind of hesitant. Because like I don't know if that will play into that, but it also sounds like it could very easily.
Oh, 100%. And this also goes along super well with one last statement they made that is so telling of how kind of in the dark they are. Because outside of PC, right now, where do you two go to play your indie games? Like your smaller, like the games that are like $20, usually made by like a handful of people.
Like, for me, it really depends. I'm a weird case, because, like, I actually like trophies.
Okay.
Like, I'm one of those fucking weird people. So, I do tend to kind of default to PlayStation a lot. But that said, it's not like I have any shortage of indie games on my Switch or PC either.
Yeah.
I usually default to my laptop. Mostly because it's really easy for me to just pop on Steam and then just scroll through and be like, oh, you look cool, you look cool, you look cool. Oh, we'll try that one. That's only $2. I'll take it. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Though Switch has been kind of grabbing my attention a lot just because it's such a nice little portable thing. I can just buy cute little things on the go. It's great.
Exactly. And that's the point I wanted to get at is like the Switch has been really good for a lot of independent developers. Like I can go and play Baba Is You if I just want to like do a quick few puzzles, or Luca What's Luca's subtitle?
Born of a Dream.
Born of a Dream. Luca Born of the Dream is coming out in like 4 days from as of recording, January 3rd. Go buy that if you haven't played it already. And
It's absolutely stellar. I am very biased though. Like I was part of that, so just disclosure.
Yeah.
But like I was a fan of that game before I worked on it.
Yeah.
I cannot recommend it enough.
So yeah, the Switch has been really good for that, and then you have PlayStation being like, yeah, independent games, whatever. But they also were saying their main competition for the next generation is probably going to be Microsoft as usual, because as they see it, Nintendo mostly focuses on the younger generation, which it is true that they tend to like have a more family-friendly focus, but they have like a really high sales rate for like over 18. Like it's not as if older people aren't buying the Switch en masse as well.
Yeah, because the thing is like it's too practical of a product.
Yeah,
like it's almost, if you're into games, you are almost provably fucking up if you can afford to buy a Switch and you aren't.
Yeah,
because I mean, what was it? Because like we were talking about Luca a bit. You've played Luca, so you know what I'm talking about. Because like that game's a lot of fun. It's really good, but it also has these like really long visual novel sections that I think are really cool, but they are also a bit much. You know, they can be a bit much to kind of like sit down and like play like in their entirety on your computer or something like that. But I've been playing it on my Switch. I got an early code. Fucking playing it in your bed. Like, fucking, like, try out playing a handheld visual novel sometimes. It is way cozier than doing it, like, on a desktop or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like reading a book or something.
Yeah, who would have fucking thought?
But yeah, I bring that up because I think PlayStation is kind of doing itself a disservice if they're not paying attention to what Nintendo's doing. I don't know if that's what they intended by that comment. Maybe it's just how they see their competition right now, but they definitely need to be paying attention to what Nintendo's doing specifically if they want a chance in this next generation.
Like, I will say, though, what was it? I'd kind of rather this than the alternative, which is what we got during, like, the Wii, where we got everyone just trying to ape Nintendo, and all of it sucked. All of it fucking sucked. The feeling I'm kind of getting in the long term, if I were to guess, putting myself in like the shoes of a Sony executive, of like a PlayStation executive specifically, if I were them, I would probably recognize that like AAA gaming is probably going to start pushing a bit more towards VR. I don't see that becoming the thing anytime soon, but kind of in the same way that like back in the 90s around like the SNES, N64 era, you could kind of tell that games were beginning to trend 3D. They were beginning to trend polygonal. And like, and by no means that became the only thing, but like aiming towards that is probably what I would do if I was working at Sony. Because, like, you're not going to make a portable system that can keep up with fucking Nintendo. You tried that twice, and both times failed miserably. It's not happening. So the next thing you can do is double down on what it is that you specifically do really well. And given that Sony has won, like, 3 out of the 4 console wars they've been in, yeah, probably sticking with, like, big home-centered hardware is kind of the best call they can make.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with all that. Like, I don't think Sony are entirely negligent. I think just sometimes they kind of get a little bit on their high horse and kind of lose sight of the...
Oh, no, they get very arrogant.
Yeah, they get very arrogant about what they're doing, and then they make a big, dumb mistake. But I don't think they're being grossly negligent.
Yeah.
So... But we'll have to see. This is a lot of just speculation at this point. But it is very telling about this next year, because within the next year, we're going to be hearing more and more about these consoles. and hopefully they will hear what people are saying.
Yeah, I'm going to be really interested to see how this stuff plays out. I like, the bright side is, for the most part, I don't have like the same level of dread I had going into like this console generation. Because this one was scary at the start, because it looked like everyone was going to ban used games. It looked like everyone was going to like start charging ludicrous amounts for online play. It really looked super exploitative at the start. And like, I'm not getting that here.
No.
This actually so far feels much more consumer friendly. I may be wrong about that. Obviously, we don't know too much, but I don't have those like doom and gloom vibes that I had last generation.
The future isn't bleak.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the last controversial thing. And it's so weird that this is such a big controversy, but considering the fandom, it kind of makes sense.
It makes complete sense, even if it's still kind of weird.
Pokémon recently had a big controversy. So essentially, for those who haven't been paying attention to this, it was announced with Pokemon Sword and Shield, the next mainline games, that not every Pokemon from the national Pokédex, basically the 180 that currently exist, not every one of them are going to be included in the next game. And not every one of them can be transferred over into the next game. So if you have, let's say, a Dodo from your first Pokemon game that you've been constantly transferring over, it might not transfer over to the next game because there's no assets to it. Because this problem is mostly them dealing with the fact that they have to make animations, Switch-related animations for all these Pokemon, and it's just become too much, is basically what they've said is why they can't include every one of them.
Okay, I just don't get why everybody's so fucking mad. Because, one, it's not as if they haven't been putting out other, like, really fan-servicey, okay, you get all your old shit games. Because we just got Let's Go Eevee, Let's Go Pikachu. It's not like they can't do that anymore. And secondly, it just makes the most narrative sense, because, let's be real here, you cannot find, like, a monkey in New York City, okay? You just can't.
I mean, yeah, but to kind of counterpoint that, like, because, like, I'm in a really weird place with this, because I used to be, like, super into Pokemon. Like, I was super into it. So, like, for me, I'm kind of two minds on it. On the one hand, I am kind of like, yeah, that makes sense, fine, whatever. And on the other hand, I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Because the thing is like, yes, it makes more narrative sense, but we're also not talking about having every single Pokemon spawn in the game. That's never been a thing. We're talking about the ability to trade Pokemon in, which has always been a thing. And it making narrative sense doesn't matter a whole lot in that context. But more than that, more to the point, knowing what I know about, like, competitive Pokemon, which is more or less the kind of, like, bigger part of the outrage here, like, kind of the, if not the biggest part of it, at least kind of the core of it, like the kindling. And, like, to that end, it's kind of akin to, like, releasing a Smash Bros. Game without certain characters. Like, yeah, you can do it. It's very justifiable. We get it. But you're still hurting the game and taking shit away that we were really used to having.
Well, it's
okay. Well,
it is
I can
partially
kind of
because
understand on that end, but again, we do have to think about the 800 plus Pokemon that would have to be animated. I can't even do 5 frames without wanting to kill myself.
Like, absolutely, and I empathize with that, but at the same time, like, first off, it's fucking Nintendo. It's not like they can't do it. Secondly, these animals are your franchise. You spent fucking nearly 2 decades endearing us to each and every one of them, trying to make them all important and valuable, saying that any of them could be your partner, any of them could be your favorite, and suddenly we're, like, throwing down the dagger and being like, actually, no, these are the only ones.
My counterpoint to that is there's two counters to that point. Is one, there's a lot of, like, dare I say, loser Pokemon that like you look at and you're like, how many people genuinely care about Quillfish? Like, how many people are that upset if Quillfish doesn't make it into the game? Outside of the idea of you can't catch them all, how many people would be like, man, I really loved catching Quillfish and having that on my team? It's not fucking Gengar or Alakazam, where it's like, oh, those are like mainstays of this franchise. And the other thing is,
But then again, the thing is like, what may be a loser Pokemon to you could be someone else's favorite. Like, my favorite Pokemon overall is Magnezone. Fucking Magnemite's third evolution. A lot of people would look at that and think it's really lame, it's really obvious, it's really dumb.
I feel like Magnemite is such a classic Pokemon. I feel that would be hard to say that one would be like a loser one. I'm thinking of the ones that are like one-offs.
I'm talking
that, like,
specifically. I'm talking specifically about Magnemite's third evolution, which wasn't introduced until Gen 4.
Because I think you could go to like the Pokemon. Because I think you could go to like the Pokemon popularity contests and like call out like 50 at the bottom just very easily. That's like these are ones no one
definitely
votes
think
for.
There's some calling there. I definitely think there's some justifiable calling that could be done. You know, there are definitely certain Pokemon that fucking who gives a shit.
Yeah.
Fucking. Like, hell, there are even certain legendary Pokemon where it's like, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
But, like, but at the same time, like, I'm not saying necessarily that I agree with the outrage or anything like that, but that, like...
You understand
I understand it. I understand it, and, like, to some extent, however minor, part of me does empathize with it. You're not going to see me ranting about it on Twitter or anything, but, like, the fact is, in my heart, I had that same kind of emotional pullback, and yeah.
Well, another thing to consider that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, and I think it's worth noting in terms of them, like, cutting back a little bit, is how many duplicates of Pokemon do we have? Because every generation, there's always like, oh, it's that version of this Pokemon. How many versions of Pidgey are there? How many versions of Pikachu are there? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going to want them to keep things like Mimikyu in
Electric
there.
Rodent, normal
but
bird.
there's how many versions of Electric Rodent? Or some equivalent to Rattata, where they're the like normal type rodent thing that you catch very early on, or the Caterpie bug Pokemon. Yeah, there's always like these very archetypal Pokemon that if you just like line them up in a generation, you could go, okay, we don't need like 5 versions of this. You know what I mean?
Well, that brings me into another thing, is that we're talking about like all this stuff of like, oh, there's stuff that can be cold, there's stuff that's unneeded kind of thing. Oh, well, at least me and Fox are, but like, the thing is that I don't even think they're going to be cutting that many.
That too.
I really don't think they are, because in a lot of the previews we've seen so far, we've seen a lot of familiar faces. You know, fucking just Onyx just there. So, honestly, if they're just cutting like 20, I wouldn't be surprised.
I think it'll be more than...
I think it's definitely going to be more than 20. I'm honestly... if we're taking bets on this, I'm betting 200 minimum.
I was going to say around 200 would be the safe bet to me, because we're seeing in those trailers, we're seeing like the heavy hitters that everyone knows. A lot of your Gen 1s, Gen 2s, your very popular Gen 3s, but I don't think we're going to see a lot of the forgettable ones, so I think that's what they're going to be doing. Are there certain people that are going to lose out on their possible favorites? Maybe. But I compare this to something like Street Fighter or, you know, Mortal Kombat. You move over a generation, maybe not everyone from the last roster makes it over, but then you hear from the devs and they're like, oh yeah, like less than 1% of the population played those characters, so we kind of chose not to put them in because that's a lot of work to animate that character nobody plays.
But all the same, like, if Smash, for instance, has proven anything... is that, like, if your game is popular enough, 1% is a fucking lot of people.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people.
Touche.
Like, what was it? I mean, I don't think in all my time growing up, ever, I saw people playing, like Pichu, for instance. I have never met a Pichu main until Smash Ultimate. Not a single one. But people were still so fucking hyped that Pichu was back. Because, like, the thing is with shit like this, it becomes part of the series' legacy. It's more than just, like, a set of mechanics or something to play with. It becomes, for many, kind of iconic to the franchise. You know? Like, for me, what was it? Growing up, one of my favorite Pokemon was Houndoom, for instance.
Oh, I love Houndoom.
The odds of Houndoom winding up in this game, I think, are kind of low. Like, honestly, he's probably one of the ones I would cut. But, like, fucking Houndoom to me is, like, peak Pokemon. So, like, I'm not that invested overall. So I'm not going to get mad about it or anything. But, like, it can't help but make me just a little sad.
Well,
you know? And I think that's where a lot of this kind of comes back to.
I think that's actually a good question to end this part of the conversation off on. Is what's one Pokemon that if you heard it got cut for this, you'd be like, entirely fuck this game?
Well, my first instinct is to say Eevee, but I already know that one's not being cut.
I don't know, because, like, I don't really feel a lot of hard attachment to, like, one or the other, because every generation I kind of find, like, wow, this is my favorite for this generation.
Actually, I think I have two good examples. Two very good examples. The popular example that I don't think will get cut, but would be, like, a very deal-breaker thing, would be if Piplup and by proxy Empoleon got cut. If you couldn't have them, that would be to cut a starter, you know?
Yeah.
And especially a starter that's been kind of like...
like a fan favorite?
Yeah, kind of a fan favorite, kind of important in, like, the meta and all of that shit. Or, for me personally... and this one I do genuinely expect to get cut. I will be shocked if this doesn't get cut. But Skarmory. Skarmory is another one of my favorite Pokemon. I would kill for that thing to get an evolution. And now it's looking like not only will it not get an evolution, I'd also bank money that it doesn't show up.
Yeah, I can 100% see that. For me personally, they're kind of together because of, like, just kind of how they're paired usually. For me, it's if they cut the Gengar family, because if they cut that, then the logical thing would be to cut the Alakazam family, because they always kind of are somewhat of a pair, so to speak.
I think Gengar is going to be totally fine. He's way too much.
Yeah,
of a
that's what I mean. It's like there's no way
he's in the fucking fighting game.
Yeah, there's no way he would be cut, but it'd be that.
Gengar's gonna be fine. He thick.
Yeah.
Chubby boy.
Rotund.
Yeah, but yeah, Jade, you don't have like a favorite Pokemon that you'd be just like, screw this entire thing if they got cut?
Like, I don't know. It's just one of those things where maybe I'm too understanding about it. Maybe animation school has just scarred me. There's a reason I left.
You can't tap it. You can't tap into
like,
that.
I'm just so sympathetic toward not wanting to fucking deal with that. But like, you know, and like my favorite's always been Totodile. But like, you know what? Like, I have my Totodile. I have so many other wonderful Pokemon games where I can have my little baby boy. So, I'm fine.
You're too reasonable,
like
Jade. This isn't fun.
I mean, like, that's totally fair. But at the same time, it is, you know, their job.
This is a problem that Game Freak kind of made themselves. Like, this has been a problem that's been snowballing.
Because, like, I remember fucking, like, even, like, 3 gens ago, people were just like, do we really need more Pokemon? Can't we just, like, take what we got and build something really cool out of it first? Like, do we need to keep this? Because there's no way this is fucking sustainable. What are we going to do in, like, 30 years? Have, like, 4,000 Pokemon? Literally? Like, this is not sustainable. So, like, this was kind of inevitable, and I fully recognize that. But it's also, like you said, they did it to themselves. I don't think a whole lot of people would have been terribly upset if they just kind of, like, I mean, done something like fucking Hey You Pikachu. You know, a kind of remix game, except something a bit more ambitious, a bit more in line with the traditional games, where it's just like, here's multiple regions. here's a shit ton of Pokemon. You can catch them all easily in one place now. There we go. And that's the other thing is I think, like, and at this point it's me asking for games that don't exist, which I realize is so far fucking beyond the pale. But, like, I think this would be met with way more backlash, or way less backlash, if there had been, like, just one last Pokemon game on, like, the 3DS that was kind of like a greatest hits of sorts of, like, all of the DS games. And then you could probably get away really easily with just, like, a clean break of, like, this is the new Dex, we're going forward, this is a new chapter of this franchise.
Yeah.
And it feels like they did not plan that far ahead.
Oh, no, this has been, like, a constant, like, building of a Jenga tower that they didn't know how high it was going to be, and now they're starting to pull stuff from the bottom, and it's getting really rickety. Like, everybody was like, okay, like, it's high enough now, you can stop, like, we gotta, like, build a foundation. No, higher, though. Higher, more Pokemon. People really like more Pokemon. It's like, it's okay, guys, like, it's fine. It's like, but we want 3D Pokemon. No, more.
Have you ever heard the tale of Icarus?
flew on his wings of wax. But
yeah, Icarus was actually a Pokemon.
So yeah, that's, I think, all we have to say about that one, right?
Yeah, I think we're probably good. All right, with all of the news taken care of, the main topic today is games we think are underrated.
Oh boy, that's a buzzword.
Yeah. Except we're all going to have games that are actually underrated, like Fortnite. I'm sorry, I'm just never going to get tired of Fortnite jokes. They're just too fun to make.
You know, it's not
Fox,
like it can
what
stop you.
underrated games do you have?
So this is less a game specific and more a series. And that's Dragon Quest Monsters. So this is the Pokemon. This is Dragon Quest's answer to Pokemon in the Game Boy era. Because you guys know the Dragon Quest RPG games, you know, the progenitor to the RPGs, basically. So in 97, I think, in Japan, because I don't think we got until about 99, they basically just made a Dragon Quest, but instead of having your party is monsters from the series. So you typically start out with, like, a slime and a Drakey. And they play fairly similar to a Dragon Quest game, but just you're using monsters. But it's got some very interesting mechanics for what it is that actually kind of differentiate it from Pokemon.
How does it stack up to something like Shin Megami Tensei?
Ooh, that's a tough one, because I think that these games came before SMT. So it's a tough comparison.
I think
the Slime series.
Yeah.
I think the main games came before SMT, but I think SMT's been around since, like, the NES, I think. Or at least the SNES.
True. Let me just double check. SMT 1.
Because, like, kind of what I understand is what happened is Shin Megami Tensei was kind of one of the first around, like, in terms of, like, enemy recruitment into ally, that kind of thing. Not necessarily capturing anyone, but, you know, it's kind of vaguely the same idea.
Yeah.
Then Dragon Quest V, which I have not played, but I have heard a lot about, had, like, a monster capture system.
Yes.
That basically directly inspired Pokemon.
And then
it becomes Pokemon happened,
full circle
and then
thing.
Everyone was just like, "This is some fucking money, dude. We need to get on this."
Yes, 100%. That is very much a fair delineation of how things kind of went, because then it went full circle, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna make this monster series now that Pokemon's popping." Because it's hard to not think that this came from Pokemon, because it came out like a year or two after the first game in Japan, which was, like, you know, mega successful.
I always find series like that really interesting, and we see it all the time in games where, like, someone will come out, do, like, idea, like, X, but not do it as well as it could have been done, and then someone will come along just slightly later, refine it, it fucking explodes, and then like the original people are just like scrambling to catch back up.
Yeah. To your answer your question, I think it holds up really well to the SMT series. It's not as self-serious as the SMT series is, because basically it's your classic JRPG thing of like, oh, you're a new kid that got transported to this crazy world, and I think in the first one you're basically trying to save your sister, and to do that you basically have to like win tournaments and get to like the highest level, which means you have to go and basically recruit monsters. And each world has like a boss monster that you end up recruiting guaranteed. But the minion monsters that you kind of run into just in random encounters, you actually kind of have to persuade them to your side. Sometimes they might just randomly go, hey, you're cool, I'll join you. But typically you have to like give them meat. You have to like curry their favor. And then they'll go, oh, hey, you're cool. Okay, I'll join you. And you have like a farm for your extra ones.
Just like making real life friends.
Yeah.
Just give them barbecue and they're like, okay.
You're cool. It does one thing that I really appreciate it. Now that I'm thinking about it, SMT did have this first, I think. But it was the first time I encountered it as a kid and I legitimately loved it. Is unlike Pokemon where breeding is more just like, hey, you put this and this together. Whatever the mother or father, I think's breed is, it'll make that. Unless it's a Ditto, then you just are making copies.
I think it's randomized.
Yeah, but with
whatever, it doesn't matter.
With Dragon Quest Monsters, there actually is like a rule set, and everything has a family. So there's a family of slime type monsters, and they're all kind of different. But you can look at it and be like, oh, that's a slime. Like this is the night slime, where there's like a little knight riding on top of it, or this is the healer slime where it's actually floating and it's got like tentacles and stuff. But
that's actually very cute.
Yeah, but there's a thing where you'll breed like say a slime with a knight, and then it'll make the knight slime. So there is like a logic to how you breed things, and that's how you get the stronger monsters. Because a lot of them will start to like mid max at a certain point. So eventually you're gonna have to start breeding to get those stronger monsters. And
it sounds to me like a much more thought out version of SMT's Fusion.
Yes, yeah. It's not like random as that one, because you can usually see kind of a logic, but sometimes you'll breed something and it'll create something entirely new, like, oh, here's Giant or here's Golem, and you're like, okay, cool. And it's just really fun. It's just a really nice, fun series. I was telling Jade earlier, I thought it kind of ended off on Dragon Quest Monsters Joker on the DS, like early 2010s. And it was just like, okay, it's just a series that kind of fizzled out. People just kind of stopped caring about it. Whatever. I'll just live with my yearning for this series to continue, and just kind of live vicariously through stuff like Persona or the new Digimon games that have similar mechanics. And then
you just got to play a real Shin Megami Tensei game.
And then when I went to Japan, I was in a Toys R Us or something like that, and I happened to walk by the game section, and I look over at the DS games, and it's like, oh, Dragon Quest Monsters Joker 3. So this series has just been continuing and just hasn't been localized, at least like legally, because fuck you guys. So I guess I'm gonna have to like get a fan translation or some shit. But so that's my underrated series. Cause go play Dragon Quest Monsters if you can. If you can get Joker on the DS, because it's really fun and it like is a perfect encapsulation of what I like about that series.
When I was a kid, I remember playing one that was like the slime one, and you had to like build your party and like also build your battleship, but I can't remember
You're
which one
thinking
that was.
about I know exactly which one you're talking about. It's not the
It
same
was so
thing,
fun.
but I know exactly what you are talking about. It's like Slime Adventures or something.
One quick question coming from someone who knows basically nothing about this franchise other than that it exists. Is because like one of the kind of things I find defining for both Pokemon and Shin Megami Tensei is their level design.
Okay.
You know, because Pokemon very much sets up this feeling of adventure that it kind of like makes you feel through like obstacle courses and that kind of shit, puzzles. Whereas like something like Shin Megami Tensei is much more like, here's a maze you have to get through, good luck. Where does this kind of fall? Like,
The
what kind
early
of
ones, the first one specifically, not the second one. The first one falls very much into the latter, where it's just, here's your tile set, figure out your way through, and you're just kind of going through. I can't remember if it's randomized, but it basically feels very randomized because it's just like there's no real pure logic to it.
kind of like Etrian Odyssey?
Kind of, but it is top.
If you've
it
played
is
that.
top view. But
Okay.
when you get to
okay.
the second one does have very thought out level design and a much more fleshed out story. And then they kind of kept that up, so it did evolve the level design as it went.
Okay, yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, no, I'm very interested in that.
And
Maybe a good place for me to get started with Dragon Quest.
Jade, you were thinking of Dragon Quest Heroes Rocket Slime. That's what you were thinking of.
Oh, there we go.
That game is also
Rocket
fun.
Slime again.
That game is fun, but yeah. But Jade, what's your
Listen,
what's
it
your,
was so good.
What's your first is
Oh,
that
my
is that your
underrated-
underrated game? Is Rocket Slime your underrated game?
No, I'm not gonna make Rocket Slime my underrated game because I haven't played that since I was a kid. So like, I'm gonna have to like replay it, you know, just to see if it's as good as I remember it being. But the first one I want to talk about is an indie game that I actually played really recently with Sean. So it's called Kingdom. It's an indie game made by Thomas Van Denberg and Marco Bankale. I think that's how you say his name. I'm so sorry if that's not. But it's got this really interesting like 8-bit artsy forest aesthetic, and you're this guy on a horse and you're a king, and basically it's a resource management game. I really like these, even if they stress me the fuck out. And basically it's your job to kind of build your kingdom, build up your funds and distribute them, and kind of create your tower defense, which defends your people against like these nightly waves of monsters that only get like progressively scarier and progressively worse the more time goes on. But you also have a secondary goal where like you basically cannot survive the winter. So you're trying to like uncover these artifacts and build this giant ship before the winter comes. And it's really atmospheric in the way that like there's basically no music, there's no dialogue. It's really quiet and eerie and almost uncomfortable. And then when the night comes, it's like, oh fuck, what the fuck is that? And it's just really good at its art direction, and the way that like it sets itself up mechanically makes it a really interesting and fun experience.
It kind of, looking at it, it kind of reminds me of like a side-scrolling Dwarf Fortress.
Kind of, yeah. That's
Or
probably
like if Terraria were like if Terraria were more structured like actual Minecraft.
yeah. Like, it's interesting because like you get like your funds, and then essentially that's how you distribute like what gets built that day or what gets like advanced that day. But then you also got to manage like, oh crap, the monsters last night fucked up this shit I spent money on, so now I have to spend more money making sure like we don't all fucking die again.
Yeah,
But-
that sounds like Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because it builds up this tension. But the game itself, like the gameplay before the night hits is so peaceful and like serene, and there's like deer frolicking through the woods and like a beautiful reflection in the riverside. It's like, wow, this is so pretty, but I gotta hurry or else I'm gonna fucking lose it.
Yeah, looking at it, it looks like a pretty cozy game. Like it feels a lot like something that's trying really hard to kind of juxtapose kind of that, you know, tranquility, that kind of chilled out vibe with like the nighttime of oh shit.
Yeah, it really is oh shit, because there's like a portal on the far left, because the far left is like no zone, but there's also like a lot of rare shit you need there, but that's right where they spawn every night, and there's like things crawling out, there's things with wings and like gaping maws. It's like, okay, I don't want to deal with that today. I'm just gonna ride off on my horse and let my drones handle that shit. And it's also cool because on one of my playthroughs, on one of the last nights, where I'd finally, like, built the ship and everything and we're scrambling, the monsters were too strong for all of my defenses, so I was literally running to get on the ship before they got me, and they're, like, eating through my civilians. I'm like, we have to sacrifice some of them, long live the king! Because as long as you live, you're fine. So, yeah, that's my one, if we're doing this, like, one at a time.
What was it? I'm gonna piggyback off of that one with my first one, which is it's a game that I feel like most people at this point have heard of, but I feel like not many people have actually sat down and played it, and that is Mountain Blade, specifically Mountain Blade Warband. If you haven't played this, it is a Western RPG that is one of the most open-ended games
Ryan,
I've ever played.
Can I ask something
it's kind
very
of unreal.
quick first? Just to help people out that might be looking at this,
yes.
just because of the pronunciation, is it Mount and Blade or Mountain Blade?
Yeah, it's three words.
Okay.
It's Mount and Blade. I realize that it's like it's a fucking name.
It is two words
it
that
blends
end up
together
blending
really
together
easily.
Naturally. It's not necessarily your fault. It's just I know there will be people that are like, how do I? There's nothing Mountain Blade.
Although I'm sure Google would do the work for you on that. But then again, I don't actually know that. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Actually,
anyways,
yeah,
it's
it
Mount
autocorrect,
and
so.
Blade. And this, like, it is without exaggeration one of the most open-ended games I have ever played, because effectively what it is you build your character, you choose a background, you start up the game, you could go through kind of like the tutorial, the prequel, that kind of shit, and then you get out into the open world. It's your call. What do you want to do? Like, there is no plot line. There is no end game. There are no quests really to speak of. What there are a lot of bandits to fight. There's a lot of kingdoms to talk to. There's a lot of towns to visit and potentially pillage and raid. There's a lot of armies to recruit. And you can literally be any number of fucking things. It's actually kind of shocking. You can play through the game as like I know people have played through the game as like a bandit king, just going from town to town, sacking everything, taking as many resources, till eventually like they start to pull the attention of like the neighboring kingdoms, who then start to like attack you as like an actual military force. And then maybe you take to the seas to escape them, and you become a pirate king or some shit. That can happen. None of this is codified, I should be clear, but like those kinds of plot lines are exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. For example, the longest playthrough I ever had on it, for like a single file, came to about 40 hours. And my story for that was basically, I start the game, I immediately kind of like start making a name for myself, recruit a couple people, take down a couple of local bandit tribes, build my reputation for a bit, and eventually I get an invitation to one of the local lords. I start talking to them and kind of get in on their good side, and just kind of ride that out for as long as possible until I get an offer from another lord to betray the lord that I'm serving, and in return he will let me marry his daughter, which gives me lordship status, which means I can then own fucking property, like land. And I then use that to kind of like spin it into my own kingdom eventually. So I just kind of go through this natural storyline of becoming a king, and then I start, like, plotting against other kingdoms, because of course I'm going to fucking try and rule everything. What's the fucking point of being king otherwise? And, like, it genuinely created some actual political drama. Because, like, the dialogue and the lines that go on are relatively basic. They're simple. They're pretty cookie cutter, because they're designed to be kind of like D&D in a way, kind of meant to be inserted into any situation, but also kind of like D&D. The actual happenings aren't nearly as important as much as the actions that are happening and what you kind of place onto them, if that makes sense. So it gives you a lot of leeway to kind of craft your own story, live whatever kind of fantasy life you want to be. You can also, like, live as, like, a famed merchant or whatever. That is also an option. There are all kinds of ways to play this game. It's actually kind of staggering to the point of being a little intimidating. But I also don't want to oversell it, because, like I said, part of that trade-off of, like, that level of open-endedness is, first off, if you're not someone who has any interest in kind of directing your own experience, it's going to get pretty boring pretty fast, because you're not going to be given any direction. And likewise, because it's designed to fulfill so many roles, most of those roles don't have too much depth to them, aren't too fleshed out, and are kind of a little jank. Like I said, the dialogue is a little wonky in most places, a little bare bones and basic. The combat system is fine, it works, but, like, it's not Devil May Cry or any shit like that. It's not even Dark Souls. It's functional, you know. Same with, like, all of the writing. There's all kinds of, like, jank throughout the game that can very easily make it unpalatable if you're not someone who's willing to forgive that. But if you are...
But, like, when did this game come out?
I want to say, like, 2011, 2012.
Yeah, I remember it being a little bit later.
Because, like, I know I played Warband back in 2012.
We'll just say somewhere in that general vicinity.
It's about a decade old at this point. And I know they're coming out with the sequel soon. That may fix all of these issues I'm talking about. May make it significantly worse. I can't say for sure one way or another. But I would say, no matter what, even if you don't play Mount & Blade Warband, which I kind of recommend you do, but even if you don't, I would highly recommend you keep an eye on its sequel. Because I think that game, given the amount of time and effort they've put into it, I genuinely believe it's going to be stellar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I'm looking at this and it looks like an interesting game, but it does look fairly late 2000s jank, despite being 2012.
Like I said, I think the main reason, because like I said, there's definitely jank there, but it's also because it is such a broad game with so many potential game states.
Oh, yeah, no, I 100% agree with you on that. Like, yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely not a game for everyone, but if you are... I'll put it this way. If you are someone who likes to play, like, Fallout or Elder Scrolls by completely ignoring the main story, you just, like, start the game, get through the tutorial, and then immediately walk the other way from the fucking, like, checkpoint marker. If you're that kind of person, this game was made for you. You will not find many things that better cater to that impulse. So I think that about covers that one for me.
So that brings it back to me?
Yeah.
I believe so.
Speaking of building factions and kind of teaming up with people and whatnot, my second pick for underrated game, and it's underrated for a very specific reason, is Wonderful 101.
Oh, yeah, duh, of course.
Because that game is only underrated because it's locked to the Wii U, and it sold, like, I think it sold under 100,000. Like, I'm pretty sure it sold, like,
yeah, I was gonna say, it sold like Gardo.
I feel like this is less of a recommendation and more of a petition to Nintendo to please, for the love of God, adapt this game for the Wii U.
I mean,
Or for the Switch.
the Platinum
mean
did
the
say
Switch?
that they did have. I think they said they were glad they looked at the demographics or something. They looked specifically at like what the demand was for. And I'm really hoping at some point Kamiya just comes out and says, "Yeah, nobody cares about this. We're not making a port."
Just something.
We're glad we did we're glad we did the metrics. Now we know we don't do this. But for anyone who doesn't know what Wonderful 101 is, it's made by Platinum Games, the people who did Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, the gameplay aspect of Nier Automata. These people know their combat. That's what they think. That's what they do. And Wonderful 101 is this really fun send-up to essentially the Sentai Transformers genre, where instead of controlling one character, you're controlling a group of up to 100. And you're basically just like looking at them all from above using the Wii U's touchpad, and you're kind of directing them, and then you're making shapes to tell them like what to turn into. So they'll all group up and turn into a giant sword or a giant gun. And you're basically doing like Bayonetta style gameplay, where instead of doing crowd control, you're the crowd.
Yeah.
And Codex, you probably have stuff to say about this.
Yeah, no, I've got a little bit. What was it? One thing I definitely want to kind of also emphasize is that it's not just a send-up of, like, Sentai and all of that. Like, that's definitely a big part of it. But it's also, in a weird kind of way, a send-up of, like, the entire character action genre.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, fucking, like, one...
Yeah, there's a character who's not Bayonetta.
There's a character who's not Dante.
I mean, you joke, but they literally have Bayonetta in the game.
Yeah, Bayonetta, Jean, and Rodon are fucking completely playable.
And the most important person in the character action genre, Kamiya.
Hideki Kamiya. Hideki Kamiya is playable in this game. It's actually, fun fact, what's really great about Hideki Kamiya in Wonderful 101 is he makes you completely busted if you play with him and your team, but he also makes you die with one hit, and the canon reason is because he demands perfection.
Oh, that's so good.
It's so
what a
fucking good.
Asshole.
It's not that he's too
that
weak,
is
it's
without
that
exaggeration
you suck.
the most Kamiya thing ever done in mankind.
That's so good. But fun fact that I think some people know but most don't is this was originally supposed to be like a Nintendo setup. It was supposed to be, instead of like 100 kind of random characters, it was actually supposed to be like Nintendo IPs.
Yeah, like Wonder Red was supposed to be Mario, Blue was supposed to be Link, Pink was supposed to be Peach, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think they actually did better with what they did, because that would have been so... I can't imagine what that would have been like in the original pitch. I think it works much better as this whole, Sentai hero transformation thing. Like, they literally have a henshin moment where every Wonder Red and Wonder Blue have their little transformation sequences.
I do feel like, it makes them distinct, and it kind of gives the game its own, like, really nice flavor to it. I love its style. And let's be real here. Look at Wonder Blue. He's such a loser. You just want to kiss him.
Actually, that's another thing. I think this is before without counting Automata, because that was also like a Yoko Taro collab. Wonderful 101 is very, very arguably Platinum's best story of their games.
I think there's definitely a case to be made for that, especially like upon its release. I kind of feel like even just something like Bayonetta 2 kind of supplants it, but I'm also someone who will like... I'm a big apologist for Bayo 2. I think that's got a fantastic story, and not a lot of people seem to. But Wonderful 101, without question, definitely has like one of the better action game stories out there. It knows how to like set stakes. It knows how to pay shit off. It knows how to pace itself.
And it has possibly, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't played it, it has one of the best QTE prompts of anything in its final like moment. Just like the wording of that final like button press is so good. But yeah, I think it's the best story because they really do a good job of characterizing Wonder Red and a lot of like the main people. Like, no, they don't like characterize the full 100. A lot of those characters are just like Wonder Cape and Wonder Blank. But the ones
Wonder
that are like
Toilet.
colors, the ones that are colors actually do get character moments. The ones you pick up later on don't get as much. Like, Wonder White is kind of just like this, samurai stereotype, and Wonder Black is kind of nothing. He's just like, he's a fun character, but doesn't really get much of a story. The main story focus is Blue and Red, and then the antagonists. But it is still really good, and there is like you were saying, like really good at planting and payoff and just general story flow. So I think that's where it does like a really good job. And I think some of probably their funnest antagonists for sure.
I think like in a lot of ways it may very well be Kamiya's best game. I think that's kind of the best way to look at it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because like as much as I love Bayo, as much as I love DMC1, they each have some rough edges to it, some kind of like weirdness to it, and so does Wonderful 101 to be sure. But like it still feels like a much more polished package than basically anything other than Okami.
Yeah. Well, I think, and it has a similar problem that Okami does, unfortunately, and that's the whole drawing aspect. Because
I will say,
really
if you're
loves his drawing.
I will say, if you're someone who is kind of apprehensive about like drawing during an action game and all of that, you can pretty easily circumvent it by just playing with a standard controller. You can then use like the analog stick to draw whatever shape, which sounds hard. It's really not. As a matter of fact, it's often like way easier and way quicker and way more reliable than using like any kind of touchscreen. So like if that's something that holds you back about it, I wouldn't let it.
That is true, and for specifics for anybody who maybe isn't familiar with this game, to switch around like mechanics, to switch from like the fist to the sword to this gun, you have to basically like draw shapes that indicate what you're switching to, and it can sometimes be a little bit tedious as opposed to just like quick switching like in Devil May Cry. It's not the worst mechanic, and it does feel very fitting because you are basically like signifying to the rest of the 100, okay, we're making this shape now. So it does work in that context, but it just can be a little bit tedious at times, and especially when you're doing it during cutscenes, when it's like the QTE isn't hitting a button, it's drawing a shape.
That is the worst part about this game.
Yeah.
That is the worst. As a matter of fact, like I know we're recommending this game, and I do genuinely recommend it. But legitimately, I think the worst part of the game for me actually came within the first like 5 minutes, because you have that first QTE where you're supposed to draw a line from one train car to another, and that took me like fucking 20 minutes. I could not get it to work. I drew 50 fucking lines and it was never enough. I was so mad.
Well, yeah, you're only supposed to draw one line. I don't know why you're drawing 50.
Shut the fuck up, Fox.
But yeah, despite that, I think Wonderful 101 is... I think it's
absolutely
almost certain,
worth your time.
It's almost certainly coming to the Switch. So I think anybody who's interested, just be patient and just like keep an eye for it getting a port. And when it does, jump on that because it's so worth your time. I'm very curious about how they're going to adapt the whole touchscreen, not touchscreen aspects to the Wii U.
I'm willing to guess that they're just going to like do the standard Wii U Pro controller controls.
Yeah,
probably. Where you draw it with the analog stick, and then you can like draw manually if you're playing in handheld or something like that. Although there were a couple sections in there, it would be easy to fix them, but just like a couple sections where you could only see what was happening on the gamepad.
Yeah, and that's kind of what else I was thinking of too, because there are sections where you like kind of go into a building and you're viewing it from the top on the TV, so you have to look through the controller to see what specifically is happening. Yeah, I think they can do away with that fairly well, but it is going to make it a bit of a pain to change. They're going to have to do a little bit of work.
You're going to have to port that. Like, you're going to have to actually capital P port that to make it work on another console.
Yeah. But yeah, that's basically that. Jade, what's your secondary?
So, my secondary one, because clearly the only games I ever talk about on this podcast are management games that stress me out. I'm quickly realizing this. I only ever talk about games that make me stressed. Frickin' horror games and, like, resource management spreadsheet nonsense. I'm telling you, I'm the worst when it comes to Stardew.
Yeah, no, you're a monster. I've seen your spreadsheets. Your literal, actual Excel spreadsheets.
It just makes things easier to manage, okay?
I think you eat people.
Get your fucking vor out of here. Listen, so the second game I'm going to talk about is less a game and more a series. I really love the Princess Maker games. Now, for those of you who are uneducated,
Philistines.
The Princess Maker games, basically, they're the grandfather of Long Live the Queen. Long Live the Queen, but actually good games.
To be fair,
don't at me.
To be fair, Long Live the Queen was really close to being a good game. It just needed to have literally any of your choices matter.
It was, okay, so, fucking right. Okay, I'll get into that later. But Princess Maker, they're a series of games that kind of struggled getting into the US, struggled getting localized. A lot of them didn't do very well and switched between publishers. It was a hot mess. But they're these really fun games where the premise is that you're given this magic baby, and depending on how you raise this baby, this girl can, like, save all of humanity, or she can be really fucking depressed and just die.
So basically how most parenting goes.
Actually, though. So, like, you can manage kind of the kind of person she becomes, whether or not you decide to put her through a lot of, like, fight training, or, like, you can kind of help her develop relationships with the people in your kingdom, like, whether or not you want her to, like, be friends with, like, the royal consort. That's a thing you can do. But in some of them, there's even RPG aspects where there's, like, turn-based battles and all that stuff, or, like, she can explore the kingdom, and it's really cool, and it's just got so much leeway for you to kind of play around with the kind of person you want to make. And, like, even in one, you have, like, a rival princess, and it's really cute. And, in fact, these games were kind of so fundamental to making the kind of, like, build your own,
child.
Like, build stat child game thing. Like, they made an anime based off the Princess Maker games that I actually really like, and it's called Petite Princess Yushi, and it's freaking adorable. It's great.
Hey, Jade.
It's about the power of friendship. What?
You're a fucking dork.
That's fair, but hurtful. But anyway, if you felt disappointed by Long Live the Queen, the Princess Maker games don't have the problem of, like, you only really having one choice in terms of how to proceed. Because you really can make your girl anything, and you won't die for bullshit reasons that you couldn't have possibly predicted.
I unironically may try it out, because, like, I really liked the idea of Long Live the Queen, because I am somehow inexplicably, like, one of the 500 other people to actually finish that game. And I love the idea on paper, but yeah, if you haven't played Long Live the Queen, like, basically...
There's basically just one way to play.
Yeah, here's its core problem, is it's a multiple choice story with only one correct answer. If you do anything other than a very specific, like, list of choices, you will fail. It is impossible to get to the end and have any meaningful, like, role-playing or anything like that. It's literally just, like, a visual novel that will continue if you, like, click the right buttons on a spreadsheet. That's fucking it.
Which is really fucking depressing, because, like, it plays itself as something where you have options where it's like, oh, you can be, like, a cruel princess who's, like, really violent, or you can be really sweet. But it doesn't matter.
If you try and do anything other than be like a magical princess with like supreme like, you know, superpowers and all of that shit, then your entire kingdom gets fucking murdered within like the first like 3 hours.
But Princess Maker is not that, but it is the grandfather of that. So I highly recommend them. I believe there was like an HD release of the second one. And then I know that it's pretty easy to get your hands on 3 and 4. I haven't even played the first one, but I do plan on someday. I'm
gonna have to.
Let's
check
hope
that
it
out.
gets released in the US. It won't, but I can dream.
You can read Japanese anyways.
Oh yeah, I can. Oh shit. Oh my god, I can play Princess Maker.
Fucking hate you.
Also, something just because also the most telling thing about this is that the entire series is on one single Wikipedia page. Like, and there's like 6 games, and it's all just one page. It's like, here's your blurb about each.
Fuck it here.
Just shut up. It's made by Gynax.
Fucking hate
I
everything.
didn't know
dude.
that.
I fucking hate everything. I'm done. I'm leaving.
Listen, I wasn't trying to be a weeb for once.
I see you trying to sneak that Ava back in this shit. How fucking dare you? God damn it.
Well, that's basically all I have to say about Princess Maker. It's a really fun way to waste your entire weekend. I highly recommend giving them a look. And that leads us to your last one, Ryan.
Yay. Because my last one is one that, if you know me, and hell, if you even follow this channel, you know I've recommended it a million times. And I'm going to keep recommending it until we all fucking die, or until you all play it. Whichever comes first. I know which is going to come first.
Brian, are you going to recommend Sonic Generations again?
I do unironically recommend Sonic Generations, but not the game I was going to talk about. Sonic Generations is really good, though. It's the best Sonic game. Fucking play it. No. Shadow Hearts Covenant. For the love of God, play Shadow Hearts Covenant. I am, like, the only person I think who's, like, played this game, and it is fucking amazing. Like, on every conceivable level. The gameplay is absolutely stellar. It's creative as hell. The setting is fascinating and unique. The music is one of the like best OSTs I've ever heard in a game. The plot is like fantastically well written with great characters, fantastic themes. The whole package is just this absolutely stellar gem that so few people have taken note of. I am going to inevitably at some point make some kind of big blowout video about this and talk about it at great length. But for right now, I'm just going to settle for this. So yeah, play Shadow Hearts Covenant.
I have to ask this because I already kind of know the answer, but I'm going to ask this for the people that don't know. So this is part of a series, correct?
Yes.
Do people need to play anything before this?
You see, this is one of my favorite things about Shadow Hearts Covenant, and one of the things that it does that is really fucking clever and really fucking smart is I played it not knowing it was a sequel. And I didn't actually find out it was a sequel until, like, months after completing it. But I couldn't even tell it was a sequel. It just felt like it was leaving certain things kind of vague, which, you know, for someone who grew up on Final Fantasy and that kind of shit, not unheard of, you know, to leave some questions kind of open-ended. But what it does that's really cool is if you do choose to play Shadow Hearts 1 and then Shadow Hearts Covenant, you will come into the game and you will just naturally see it as a continuation of Yuri's story, because you'll see the game from his perspective, because you'll know who he is, what his backstory is, what he's been through, and the role he's playing in this world, and you won't miss a beat. However, if you've never played it before, when you do start to play it, it will feel like the main character is a completely separate person named Karen, who you start out the game with. She is a officer on the German front in World War I, and the basic startup of it for her part of the plot, is that there is a demon in a small French town on the German border, and that is keeping them from taking over that town. So initially, you go to the Vatican and find a holy artifact to fight it with. But kind of the twist is that demon is the other major character, Yuri, the character from the first game. And long story short, shit happens, and you go on a big journey to, essentially at first defeat, this super, Illuminati-style organization that, no joke, is run by Rasputin.
I was gonna say it's the Russian royal family, right?
It's not even the Russian royal family, because this is actually so great, because one of the playable characters is Princess Anastasia, and she is being threatened by Rasputin, and you have to save her and the Tsar from being completely absorbed by Rasputin's evil plan to become a new god.
So you're basically playing the video game equivalent of DreamWorks Anastasia.
Well, here's the thing: that is literally just the first part of the game. That's not even the climax. That's not even the end of disc 1. It just keeps fucking happening. But because that's kind of what makes this game so hard to talk about. Is it's a game that kind of runs itself in arcs, and all of the arcs are fantastic, but it's hard to talk about them too much without completely spoiling them.
Would it be fair to compare it to something like Chrono Trigger, where you have all these smaller stories that kind of
I will say each other? It's kind of like Chrono Trigger in a way, but it still ultimately builds up to one very strong core point, because all of these stories are very disparate and seemingly not connected. But at the end, they all kind of feed into the same core plot about, kind of internalizing traumatic events, accepting they happened, accepting the new reality you found yourself in, and maybe just kind of coming to terms with the fact that it's not going to get all that much better in a lot of ways, that it's happened and your life is just going to suck in certain ways from here on out. It's a really brutal moral for a game starring Princess Anastasia and, unironically, and I'm not making a word of this up, a gay luchador vigilante superhero vampire. That's one character.
Was this made by Suda51?
I don't know. I don't know where this game came from, because this game company only put out Shadow Hearts games and then died. I don't even know who these people are, but it's such an off the wall game. One of your party members is Geppetto. He's one of your starting party members.
Also, this kind of did the. I don't think Yoko Taro did the first, but I associate with Yoko Taro. Is Covenant is actually continuing off the bad end from the first game. Does it not?
Yeah, no, it actually is. That's part of the reason why it feels like such a clean break from the first game, is because it does work off the bad end, which is why the main character, Yuri, is kind of going through a lot of shit right now. And it's really interesting because, like I said, it uses that to kind of talk about, trauma at the death of loved ones and how we work past that, if we even can work past that, and all kinds of other shit. It's really fascinating. What was it? And also, I would be remiss to not mention the combat system, because I recommend, if you really want to be sold this game, if you are a fan of JRPGs, just go look up any fucking gameplay of this game, because you will see a combat system that is endlessly interesting if you're someone who grew up with these games, because it's like somewhere between like Chrono Trigger's combat, but also almost like something like Paper Mario. It's very much about kind of getting set AoE attacks that you have to make sure you properly group enemies in order to get them work. It's about putting together combos in order to deal maximum amount of damage. But it's also about, like, because a big part of the gameplay is what's called the Judgment Ring. And basically all that is like fucking just, what was it? Like a spinner. You have to press X when it's in the little, like, colored section. And if you do that right, then your move comes out. If you do it on, like, the special critical zone, it will crit, it will heal for more, it will deal more damage. And I fucking love that because it means there's no RNG in this game. There's, like, almost none. However much damage you deal is purely down to how good you are at timing your attacks. And it does create, like, this constant risk-reward alchemy where it's like you're in a big fight, you begin kind of, like, arguing with yourself of, like, do I take the risk and go for, like, critical attacks, see if I can maximize damage? But if I miss any one of those, then my attack doesn't come out at all and I deal no damage. So do I just play it safe? Do I go for crits? How do I handle this? It has so much fucking depth. It's not like this. It's not like self-expression depth or anything like that. I don't want to paint that kind of picture. But as far as JRPG, like, turn-based combat systems go, I have yet to see anything that even kind of really even approaches this in terms of, like, the kind of shit you can get away with. It is really fun, and I have never, in all of my playthroughs, gotten bored toying around with it and seeing what I can do.
So you got it all out of your system?
Probably not. Honestly, like, I could rant about this for another 30 minutes, which is probably why inevitably this is going to, like, manifest as some kind of massive multi-part Klemp-style video where I just, like, go through the entire thing.
You just
pound through it. Because, like, I'm not an idiot. Like, I want everyone to play this. I deeply encourage everyone to play this. I love this game with all of my heart. But it's also really fucking expensive. It's hard to get your hands on. You need old hardware to play it, and it's not going to get an HD release probably fucking ever. So, like, I really do encourage everyone to go play it, but at the same time, I also recognize that, like, much easier said than done. So there's at some point, I'm almost certainly going to do, like, some big deep dive on it where I just go through, like, the entire game and kind of, like, you know, share what I love about it.
Okay, that's fair. So do we want to do a quick roundup of our games before we wrap this up?
I think that'd be a good way to close it off.
Okay. So for mine, it was the Dragon Quest Monster series and Wonderful 101. Jade?
I suggested the Princess Maker series and Kingdom.
I suggest Mountain Blade, and please play Shadow Hearts Covenant. It is so fucking good. Go listen to the soundtrack. It's so good. Fucking Christ.
So yeah, if you're looking for any old games that you want to give a try, I think we kind of have a bunch of games from different, like, platforms, so you could probably get at least some of these on a platform you probably have access to. Or at least maybe keep an eye out if you hear about them or if there's any ports or what have you. But yeah, I think that's about it for today. If you guys have any requests for topics, I think going forward we're going to kind of have a main topic for each podcast to go along with the news.
Tell
and
us
then we'll
the
kind of
things
just go
you
along
want
there.
us to talk about, and we'll talk about the thing.
Yeah.
We're just gonna get, like, 500 comments that are just, like, feet.
God fucking damn it. Well, now you've insured it. Now you fucking guaranteed that this is going to, like, help us none.
That's why we banned Jade from commenting on the channel.
Thanks.
Anyone who replies feet is going to get thrown into a well. Anyways, I think that about covers it.
I think it's time for you to sign us off, homie.
For sure. Thank you all for turning in. Hope you enjoyed. Love you all. Peace.
We did it, Reddit!
Yeah.
We beat the podcast!
Yay.